So this is not really the sort of ESG panel that you're used to hearing. We're taking the view of a corporate travel buyer and how ESG factors into corporate travel buying decisions when it comes to buying hotel rooms for corporate travel. So I have a very special guest who's actually flown in especially from Vienna, from Austria, specifically to do this panel with us today. Angela, thank you very much. Rather than me do a poor job of introducing you to our audience, maybe you would start by introducing yourself.
Thank you so much, Ufi. Thank you for having me today. Corporate buyer, why can I talk about corporate buyer? Because this is my job since more than 10 years. I'm in Erste Group, responsible for travel management and HR systems. And in my daily business, I cover the entire process from budget planning for business travel, deciding which partner do we source for our different categories, but also which tools do we use for the planning of business trips and for the expense part. All in one, we have the focus on the traveler, but very much also on the needs of the company, of the company's requirements.
And how many people in the audience know what the Erste Group is?
Erste Group is a bank in Central and Eastern Europe. We have in Austria savings banks. What I cover in my portfolio are 16,000 employees who are traveling and who I service with new tools. Digital transformation was also one of my biggest achievements in Erste Group. ESG came with the CSRD requirements, came as a very important topic for us as a bank because we are obliged to report on ESG data. And so my journey on ESG started, and as I realized, you can decide to include in procurement ESG, the ESG requirements, but if there are no services, you will not buy successfully.
So just as not to be rude, I should also introduce myself. My name is Ufi Ibrahim. I am the Chief Executive of the Energy and Environment Alliance. We are a coalition, a community of investors and hotel owners who are working together with regulators, with partners, to ensure that what we say is we actually achieve net zero and also environmental, social and governance leadership in a scientifically robust and commercially profitable way. So that's who I am. And today's focus, let's start with business travel, first of all, before we dive into the ESG element and how you actually make the decision as to which hotels to actually buy from. Starting with business travel. Now, after COVID, business travel took a big knock. It's had previous knocks as well. How is business travel doing? What can we as an industry, as hoteliers, expect in terms of business travel going forward? And just also for the audience to know, Angela isn't only responsible for corporate travel buying for the bank in Austria, but she also heads up the representative body for corporate travel buyers across Europe. And is working very closely with my organization, helping us on a specific project, which we'll talk about later, and doing a lot of work with the European Commission. So let's start with corporate travel. Tell us what's happening with corporate travel. What can we expect?
Right now, we are facing a transformation process. The transformation process started already during COVID because safety became much more present and really tangible for all of business traveler. But the business travel itself became much more crucial for the ESG perspective. So what I realized during the last years is that digitalization and sustainability are right now the main topics in business travel, because the expectation of the traveler itself rises a lot, seeing what is possible for the technical perspective. Now, we know that the CO2 footprint of a company is nowadays very important, and the CSRD requirements, which were crucial for us, this is not only the information we need to report, it is what we need to do to improve our footprint. So in what you asked me what is important for us, and having in mind that we as a buyer, we have a very high responsibility how we act and how we choose our partners. In former times, we talked only about prices. Nowadays, we do not talk only about prices. We do not talk only about vendor and customer partnership with relationship. We talk about partnerships, and this is so crucial for us because the expectations we have on partnerships, it's to really think the journey from the beginning to the end. That means we need data, we need the information in our booking systems, we need reliable information, we need to reflect our partnerships in the reservation systems. That means that our traveler who also need to improve their footprint, for them it's important to have the CO2 information as important as price, to see it at the point of sale to make informed decisions. On the other hand, we know that not each and every hotel has the same possibility because of the different approaches, because of the different tools we use. But all in one, what is important is to understand that technology will only serve us if we make informed decisions and if we really drive in the right direction together. Otherwise, the industry defragmented itself.
So as a bank, you are having to report on CSRD, which for everybody's information is the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. It's a European piece of legislation which requires companies of a certain size to report not only on their financial performance, but to report on their non-financial performance. As a summary. It's a bit more detailed than that, but ultimately that's what it is. It's a mandated requirement for sustainability reporting. So the bank has to do this. And the corporate travel that your employees do, that your colleagues do, that comes under your Scope 3 reporting, which is part of your CSRD reporting requirement. Is that right?
Right.
Yes. So to be able to get the information on and calculate what your Scope 3 emissions are as a bank, you are having to get the data from the hotels where they would be staying. So you said just now that some hotels can't provide you with the data. What then happens? Do you then say, okay, wait, if I can't get that data from that bank, from those hotels, I can't send my travelers there? Tell us a little bit about how do you go about actually deciding on which hotels you will send your colleagues to and which hotels you won't?
The journey begins also with the travel policy in place, and to make this sure that the framework for the traveler, for the business traveler, is appropriately done, we start already in the procurement process. In the procurement process, perhaps I need to explain you why it's important for me to manage procurement like I do. Is we have as a bank a very strong purpose. Our purpose is the financial health of our customer. Having this in mind and having in mind where we operate and where our business trips are going to, for me it was important to really make sure that the requirement of the ESG is understandable for each and every hotel provider. That means, on the one hand, I asked as a procurement, in the procurement criteria catalog, was which certifications or which standard do you apply to report ESG? And for those family-driven hotels right next to our branches or the little ones who do not always have the possibility to be certified because they do not have always the manpower behind to go through this process. And I started this. I know that my colleagues in travel management, they are applying very, very different approaches. Some of them are more strict than I am and request special reporting standards or special certifications as a KO criteria. But for me, it was important that our partners understand that ESG need to be integrated in their business, that it should be part of their operations, part of their entire service. And what happened was very interesting because some years ago I started with this approach. At the beginning I've heard also something like salesperson said, I don't care about ESG. We do not have this as a topic on our in our business. Then the other one said, I don't know exactly, I need to ask my general manager. The other ones had exactly catalog of information, what they exactly are doing. And some of them said, yeah, we do not use plastic flowers. Very interesting. But I had to also decide that if some hotels did not mention any efforts on ESG, they has been disqualified from the process. Then the next year, because we used to negotiate every year at our partnerships newly, I asked the same hotels. And more, really, year for year, I received more and more information. And they understood that this is really important for the customer side. And it is not only important for us and in the buying process, it is important also for the traveler to feel valued by the company because ESG is especially for the young generations and for the parents who are actively asking for what are you doing as an employer in terms of respecting the people and planet. Business travel is something very emotional. It has to do with relationships and with connections. And so we could manage that we grow together with the market. And this is for me very crucial. Now, in the next step, it would be essential to have agreed reporting standards globally, because we do not travel only in Austria, we do not travel only in Europe, we have trips around the world. And when we compare the market and when we sometimes stay in hotels where we do not have any cooperations because there is a conference, there is a reason why, and therefore it should be treated in the same manner, and we should be able to really summarize our footprint and to have the possibility also to manage this new figure, because we can manage budget in euro or whatever currency you have, but it should be possible to manage also CO2 emissions.
So in Europe, I understand that the value of business travel is about 120 billion euros.
Right.
What is the spend of the Erst Group on corporate travel?
Around 10 million euro.
About 10 million euros. And what you're saying is that if the hotels fail to meet your ESG criteria, they are disqualified from business. So that takes out, that's 120 billion euros worth of business in Europe alone, which is very substantive. So let's talk about that. Now that we understand the Erst Group, and just before we move on to broader business travel, because as I said, Angela also represents other business travel entities. Does anyone have any questions? If you have any questions, good. Let's get interactive.
It's just a quick question on...
James, introduce yourself, please.
James Fry from Beyond Apartments and Hotels. Yeah, just a quick one. It'd be interesting to know what percentage of Erstbank's emissions come from travel.
So what percentage of the Erst group, if you look at your scope 3 emissions, what percentage of that would you assign to corporate travel?
Around 10%. But it's significant enough that we are obliged to report. And what is very interesting, having in mind that the CSRD has the double materiality assessment, that means companies with the same volume as we have are not obliged to deliver their CO2 footprint on business travel, but they are still important for the market. And they also ask in their procurement process also about the ESG criteria. Why? Only because we do not need to report doesn't mean that it does not count for us. It is, let's say, a quality criteria for the traveler.
Okay, so let's continue then. If anyone has any questions, please don't wait. Put your hand up, I will come to you. Let's continue then. Let's talk about business travel more generally, not just the Erst group. So in terms of criteria, ESG criteria, we've had lots of conversations before, and you keep telling me that the information that you need is, tell us, what information is it that you need from hotels to be able to check that ESG criteria? What's the critical metric you're looking for?
Critical is the energy, water consumption, waste, but also the relationships you have. How do you treat your vendors? Are your vendors locally or not at all? Because this is also a very important part of the social perspective, and how do you act in your region.
So you're also looking at the supply chain for a hotel, yes, and saying, okay, what's your relationship with your suppliers?
Yes.
I mean, so what about carbon as a metric? I mean, what would the information presented to you be? Would it be energy use per square meter, or would it be carbon? What information do we need as hoteliers to be ready to provide to corporate travel buyers such as yourself, so that we won't be disqualified?
I know there are very different approaches on the market, and I saw this not only in the hotel area, but also in the airline industry or ground transportation. There are very different approaches. Therefore, for us, it's important to have a clear one agreed metric, which is feasible and fair for the entire industry and deliverable for us really across the globe, because otherwise we cannot compare. Otherwise you have always the pears and apples comparison. This is really crucial, and sometimes travel managers need to rely on what the ESG manager in the companies define. And this is sometimes a bit, it is an obstacle, because we need a stakeholder dialogue between the hotel industry and the buyers. Otherwise, we will not find a way to cover the entire value chain. And this is really crucial. We see this also in the airline industry. We see this on the ground transportation. And it should reflect, this is very important, this metric should reflect the development, because one hotel could improve. The service can be improved, and when we talk about ESG, we want to include ESG as the new normal. It should be naturally part of our business. And I do hope that in some years, I do not need to talk especially about ESG, it should be part of the entire business. And CO2 should be as important as price.
So location?
Yes.
For your colleagues, right? To be able to go stay close to the branch, for example, you said. So location?
Yes.
Then price, then ESG? How does it work? What's your priority order in terms of your buying decision?
we have this, especially in our travel policy, ESG, then price.
Right, that's really important. Hilary.
How much do you...
Sorry, Harry, introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry, Hilary ran Think Hospitality. How much do you rely on labels? The sort of green labels.
Certifications.
All kinds of certifications. Obviously, with the green claims directive coming in, that's going to change things. How much of that do you look at when you look at different properties?
For us as Erste Group, I did not define only one label. I asked, do you have a label, and which label do you have? Because I want to let room for improvement. I don't want to compete between the one and the other label. It's still not the case. We see that this development, this is the transformation process I mentioned before, and I had already so many thoughts about the transformation process. What we are doing now also on European level with the working group of sustainability, the sustainable working group for business travel, is to find a stakeholder dialogue, to really close this gap, to make sure that there is an understanding what is needed. We know that we have the technology on our side. It is possible. You can use robotics, you can use AI, you can use a lot of tools. But if you do not manage to use it appropriately, you will never see what you need to see. And this is important, to go one step back and fix the metric behind, and then you can use the technology to make it visible.
Yeah, I think, can we bring the mic to this gentleman here? I think it's a really interesting point, this point. I want to underline it and make sure that I've understood it correctly. What you are saying is, it's not enough to have a certification, because what you need is you need the information to be able to do your own CSRD reporting. So you need the information from the hotel.
Yeah, this is right.
To meet that metric so that you can then feed that into your reporting as a bank. I think that's a really crucial point.
That's right.
Hi, thank you. It's Robert Chess, Newmark Hotel Advisors. G in ESG governance. How do you make judgments on governance?
This is the most challenging part.
Why don't we drop the G?
The governance.
So, I mean, if governance really is, when you are reporting to CSRD, please correct me if I'm wrong, to the European Commission, and you are putting forward your sustainability reporting as a bank, then you are required to report on your own governance procedures. You're required to report on your board, you're required to report on things like your whistleblowing policy. There are certain things in governance, the processes that your organization follows, that you must report. But when it comes to your suppliers, interestingly, when it comes to Scope 3, currently the reporting requirement focuses much more on the carbon footprint, the carbon measure of your Scope 3, not necessarily the governance of your Scope 3. However, the S part, so human rights violations, for example, are your suppliers meeting modern slavery requirements? These sorts of things are definitely factored in when it comes to your supply chain, to your, let's call it your Scope 3 world. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to the reporting, I guess that an Erste Bank looks to do for their, because they have to report by law.
Right.
It's mandatory.
Yeah.
When is your first CSRD report going forward? Is it this year? Or
this year.
This year.
Yeah. But we report it in advance. So but the first time I had to do with the data for non-financial reports was 2013. This was a time where nobody cared about ESG. And I really struggled to build up my own database to get the figures for some calculations. So I saw the entire transformation behind. And yes, what I wish from the regulators to really close the gap, to see the information at the point of sale, what I can count at the end of the year and could report it in the ESG report, and to have reflected the efforts we do in buying, in procurement, and also in the booking process. because for the people really counts, and they want to see the efforts. They want to see the reflection of their decisions.
So you, please, if anyone wants to ask a question, we're in the last 5 minutes now, so please don't wait. Put your hand up if you want to ask a question. We are working together, and we're working together with the regulator, with the global regulator, to set the sector-specific reporting standards on sustainability. So what we're working together on with the regulator is the CSRD for the industry, right?
Right.
And we are doing this to a specific timeline. So explain to us, why are you working with the hotel sector to do this? In terms of financial, reputational, or other risk to the bank, what does the bank stand to lose or gain by working with the hotel sector to set these specific metrics that you will use as a bank? As far as possible, what does this mean in financial terms for your bank? Is the risk 10 million euros on an annual basis, or do you see the risk as being greater if we cannot fix this problem for your group alone?
Then we talk about the green transformation itself.
Yep.
Because we as a bank, we also are investors. And this is what I reflect also in my work and also in my alignment with all the travel managers in Europe and also globally, because we are also in contact with the Global Business Travel Association where we work for. It is important to really put a focus on the people and planet. Not to do anything means also not going with the time and not supporting the transformation. And I'm sure that no regulator can save the business. We need to be creative. We need definitely to put the focus also on the innovation behind the sustainability, to really make sure that we start to do business in a new way, because whatever will happen, and we know that the unforeseen is very sure for the next time. We need a resilient market, and we need a resilient industry, because what impacts the hotel industry impacts also our traveler, and the duty of care is one of the most important topics for business travel.
Definitely. I worked in business travel, as you know. I worked for American Express Business Travel for many years, and the safety and security that we could provide our cardholders and our corporate travelers was the top priority. And we had the contacts to be able to intervene if something terrible happened, if a crisis happened. And that brings me to a question that I want to ask you. Because you said ESG and then price in your decision making. So let's just try and unblock which parts of ESG then. Is it the environmental which is important, or is it the social impact side? Is it what's going to happen to your employees, your colleagues? So how important is wellness, for example? How important is the health of your traveler when they travel? And let's say that there is a hotel or service department company who has really made great investments in the health and well-being of the guest, like James's product, for example, at Beyond. Yep. Really makes significant investments in that area. But, and this is not the case, but let's just say that the environmental footprint is higher. How do you balance that? Do you say carbon first and then the wellness of people, or how do you balance that decision?
We could do a known panel on this topic. CO2 is already in the minds. So what we say, we want to reduce the CO2 emission. But on the other hand, security is no competition to ESG, because safety is crucial. There is no negotiation. This is no concurrence between, no competition between the ESG and the price part. For business travel, we need to know wherever somebody is on business trip, we need to know where the people are, because may be that they will need help. And we are also working very close with physical security, with specialists on this topic. And service behind is crucial. We all know that AI will help us. We all know that technology will help us to improve the customer experience, but we should never forget that the business traveler is not only a traveler. You have a company behind. And you should also include in the technology also the requirements of the company, because we need to know where the people are. And when we talk about change, this is nothing else than a change process. We need to change behavior. We need to make also sure that the traveler understand the new process, that they accept things which are not perhaps perfect. Sometimes they are perfect, and sometimes they want to be surprised. And if technology could help us to cooperate much more and to make the experience much more high, what I would wish is also to use technology and the partnerships with hotels to put a stamp on the business trip, to make it to a special, a special service. If you are now on business trip for Erste Group, then you receive, I don't know, an invitation for dinner, or to surprise, einfach, to surprise the traveler. I think this could open up new opportunities for business traveler and also for the hotels.
So just to try and summarize this, just to try and underline some of the key points. One, as hoteliers, we shouldn't forget that behind our corporate traveler sits a corporate entity. Two, that corporate entity, especially if they're European listed, are more than likely to have sustainability reporting requirements mandated. So they need to have actual data which they can then use for their own reporting. That data is probably equal, if not more important than a certification. And that dialogue is really important. And don't miss the opportunity to wow the customer, if they're a corporate customer, because they go back and they communicate that to their entity and are an interlocutor in terms of stakeholder relationship. Is that right? Good?
I could not say it better.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, on that note, thank you all very much for being here. And please thank Angela especially, because she flew in especially for this today. Thank you.